Hi, everyone, and welcome to a Talk Insomnia episode that I'm really excited about because there's been so many people asking for you to come on and share your story. So, extra welcome to you, Beth.
Well, thanks. Thank you. It's so good to be here, Daniel.
Did you see those comments, by the way, when people said, please have her come
I
back?
did. I did. I was like, that was perfect timing.
Yeah, no, indeed.
Yeah.
And so before we talk about like your journey, Beth, then I just want to say for everyone, I would say right off the bat, so everyone catches this. If you want to connect with Beth, see what's going on, maybe work with Beth or whatnot, you can head over to bethkendall.com and see what's going on there. So with this said, actually, I'll start with my usual question, which is how did you come in touch with the channel and the community?
Yeah. Well, let's see. Let me think back. So I was doing sleep coaching myself, and I was doing it through a little bit different lens, more through like a brain training lens. And I think I stumbled on one of your videos, and I watched a little bit of it, but I didn't have a lot of time at the moment. And so I filed it away because I was like, oh, he's really saying some interesting things here. And then you popped on my radar somehow in the sleep universe, and I watched one of your videos completely. And then I ordered your book, Set It and Forget It. I got it from Amazon, sat down to read it, and I read it cover to cover, the whole thing. And I was just blown away because the way you present your concepts in so simply, and they made so much sense. And I think that's when I reached out to you and I messaged you and I said, I read your book cover to cover. I told everyone on my business page to just run and get it because I loved it, and I think that what you're doing is absolutely revolutionary. So that's kind of how I found you. I found you on YouTube, and then I read your book. So
Yeah, no, I remember that. It was such a nice message. Actually, you wrote several super nice and encouraging messages. So it was always so nice when some people you see like, oh, there's a message from Beth. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be so nice. So that was super nice. And you like your story is a little different because you had already started coaching
yeah.
yourself when you found me. So anyway, that aside, let's talk about your journey. So you mentioned that you had insomnia, you struggled with sleep for 42 years. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which we're going to talk about today. And for people who hear this now, I think there's kind of two ways people will react to this. One is like the shock, like, oh my gosh, this can happen for that long. And then the other reaction, which can be like, oh, you can have it for that long and get out of it and still find peace. Which I hope to everyone that hear this, you realize that it doesn't matter how long you struggled. Once you start seeing things clearly, things will go really well for you. So now I've done my talking. I talked too much already. But that said, tell us your story. Where did this start? Do you remember when it started, or how did it start, Beth?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I was thinking about how to present. This is really the first time I've really like talked about it. I've written about my story a bit. So I'll I thought I'd kind of maybe take it decade by decade. And I'm really glad you presented it that way, because sometimes I do hesitate to say that I had it so long because I don't want people to think that's going to be their situation. Um, but then again, like I don't have insomnia anymore. So if I can get better after that long, anybody really can. But it started for me as a young girl. And I believe the sort of initial event occurred when my parents decided to switch bedrooms with me as a young girl and put me in the upstairs attic bedroom. And that felt like the end of the world to me. And I was really scared in that attic, and I was really upset about that decision. It really felt kind of traumatic for me at that young age. And I couldn't sleep up there because I was really scared. And I think at that age, my brain linked being awake at night as a really bad thing or a threat. And obviously I got past that, but then in my teenage years, I was having these cycles of insomnia. And I think I knew that something wasn't right because I was away at a performing arts high school. So I lived in a dorm, and I would have different roommates every semester and every summer. And I would have these cycles. Like, insomnia for me presented in cycles, and I would have these cycles where I couldn't sleep no matter what. And none of my roommates ever seemed to have this problem, and I'd be trying to figure out how they could sleep so easily and I couldn't sleep, and I just didn't understand what was happening, and this was a problem, but I was able to push through because I was younger and I was highly motivated and I was on scholarship and I was, I just pushed through. But by my junior and senior year, I mean, it was sort of already becoming a part of my identity because my roommates would make fun of me because I'd be up in the top bunk with insomnia, reading books on how to cure insomnia. Um, because it was already starting to just really kind of make its mark in my life. And then I moved into my 20s and, I had a couple careers that probably didn't help a lot. I was a professional ballet dancer, which very random hours, I'm performing at night and I'm touring and not a lot of structure to my schedule. And then I became a flight attendant, which super random hours. And, I don't necessarily think those caused insomnia, but it probably didn't help a lot to really not get into a structured lifestyle and have that sort of anchor a little bit. And in my 20s as a flight attendant, it just sort of kind of kept becoming more problematic. And, it'd be so weird because it was like I couldn't sleep at the times I was supposed to be able to sleep, but I could sleep at times where you shouldn't be able to sleep in places you shouldn't be able to sleep. Like I'd have these layovers out of Weston, like this really nice Weston hotel where it would make total sense to sleep great, but then I wouldn't sleep, but then I would sleep on an airport floor in the middle of the day on my suitcase. You know what I mean? And I was just like, what is the deal? Why can't I sleep when everyone else is sleeping, but I can sleep in these strange places where, no one else is sleeping. So, um, yeah, it was really strange. And by my late 20s, it was starting to become problematic in my personal relationships, and it sort of started excuse me, taking over my life more. It started being sort of the lens that I was doing everything through. And I think it was around my 30s where, I'm starting now to see doctors. I'm starting to go through the sleep study, go through the medical model and be like, something is really wrong, and seeing all these sleep physicians and psychiatrists and everything. And it was very despairing because they really couldn't help me. I was seeing like these top sleep doctors, um and that's when I started getting on medications and started going on the medication merry-go-round. And I was trying all of these strong medications, and they would work. um they would like kind of like knock me out, and I would feel like I would have that sleep reset, like it would reset my brain, and I'd think, okay, well, I guess every time I get into one of these cycles, I'll just have to take this medication. And that worked until it didn't. You know what I mean? Until I had to start taking more and more medication. And it's like, I remember when Michael Jackson died and thinking, I wasn't even that surprised that he had to take that heavy duty medication. Like it wasn't, to me, I totally understood that. And everybody was just like, how could he be taking this medication? I remember like not feeling that shocked that anyone would have to do that, because that's the level of like hyperarousal and hypervigilance that my brain felt like it was in. And I remember around that time in my early 30s calling like a family meeting and saying, I don't know how I'm going to do this anymore. I don't know how to navigate this anymore. It was like by the time I'm in my 30s, it's really impacting my life. And I'm having to call in sick at work a lot. And, these cycles were, it was so weird because I would have long stretches where, like, up to 9 months or so, where I wouldn't have insomnia, and every time I would get back into a sleeping stretch, I would think, oh, it's over, thank God it's done. I'm good. I've paid my dues with that. I'm done. But then it would come back. And I didn't, I didn't have any of this education at the time. I wish so much that a doctor had said, your brain is experiencing hyperarousal, or, some of these concepts, because it would have made so much sense, and it would have been so comforting to know what was happening to my brain, because I felt like my brain was completely broken and something haywire, or, it really felt to me like my brain was broken. Um, and so, I did the whole doctor thing. I was on all these medications, and I'm grateful for the medications, at the time, because they made me feel like I was going less insane, at least. Um, but it obviously wasn't a long-term fix, and I didn't. And then, that just spiraled into, I was taking medication nightly. Then it just became more and more medication, and um, yeah. And so then this just sort of escalated through my 30s, and then I had a long period of chronic illness, which is another whole whole podcast. But finally, in my, was like, what, 2.5 years ago, I got a handle on this. So I'll pause there, because I know I've been talking a
Yeah.
lot. Does it all make sense? I mean, it's such a, it's so, like, there's so many facets to this, like how this became such a part of me and my identity, and everything I had to work my life around. Everything became like, I really couldn't plan anything, or know when these cycles would occur, or make any commitments to anything, like trips or things I wanted to experience in life, because I didn't know if I'd be in one of these insomnia stretches or not. And it became very all consuming in my life.
Absolutely. And I want to say already now I can sense that, like, there's so many people who are going to hear this and be like, this is going to resonate so much with them. Like, what you said already is going to be so helpful to so many people. So that's the first thing I want to share here right away. But I had a couple questions before we kind of move forward and see what
Yeah.
happened next. Which was, one of them was, what like what were you told by doctors, psychiatrists, all these people? Like, what type of explanations did you get, or what were you told?
I was told a lot of mental illness, depression, um, nothing that made any sense to me, because I was kind of like, well, yeah, I'm depressed because this is horrible. I mean, it was depressing. But I didn't feel like that was it.
I totally get it. Yeah,
I mean,
you
I felt very minimized by the doctors, very dismissed, very just not taken seriously. I didn't feel like they understood the profound toll that this was having on my life. I don't feel like they really understood that. Like, I felt like it was destroying my life. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I mean, it just had such a seriously disruptive impact.
exactly. And no, I understand. I think, especially, I think, I mean, from the medical standpoint, I think doctors learn basically nothing about insomnia. And I believe that in the kind of psychological realm, it's more like it's thought of just as a symptom of depression, and there's very little understanding.
Yeah.
Now, which obviously, so on your end, that didn't really make sense to you. And what was your own interpretation of what's happening throughout this year? Was it basically like, there's something wrong in my brain, that was it, or did you have other ideas or theories?
I didn't at the time. All this knowledge that I've gained about the nervous system, and, all the things I'm passionate around, neuroplasticity and the unconscious part of the mind, and, all of that. I didn't know any of that at the time. And, I was seeing, like, I had tried so many things before the medication route. I had seen, I mean, everything, every type of natural modality, herbalists. I mean, the stuff I did, the teas I drank. I mean, the smell of those teas, I could just smell them right now. I mean, I was drinking every kind of concoction, every herbal blend, every fix I could come up with. I didn't love taking these medications because they were so strong. I mean, it took so much of it to knock me out. Um, but I didn't know anything about all this, back then. I mean, so this was like, a long time ago, 20 years ago. So yeah.
Exactly. So it was you really didn't know what was going on. You just knew
I
something
didn't
was
know.
wrong and you didn't know.
And that is the thing, when it is such a mystery like that, it's just piles on so much more pressure and angst and concern and worry. Like, is this going to be my forever? Like, how am I going to navigate this with my life? It's getting worse and worse. And that complete and total mystery about what is going on with your brain is, half the battle, really.
100%. And another question that came to my mind was, and this is just really for people. I kind of, in one way, don't like to ask the question because it doesn't really matter. But I know a lot of the community will kind of want to know because they will think like, oh, I wonder if she had it as bad as I have it and things of that nature. So when this was happening, when you were in the cycle of insomnia, like what was it like? Did you kind of like not sleep at all for stretches, or it was very broken up, or what was it like?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was being able to fall asleep. And it seems like if I could fall asleep, I could stay asleep. But I mean, there were so many nights where I just wouldn't sleep at all. And I would get that complete wired but tired, just that feeling of just like adrenaline coursing through your veins at all times. Like you have a coffee IV just hooked up 24/7 and you can't shut your brain off. And, you know, um, it's it's so hard because I mean, I believe there is a physical component to that, like that, just that sleep deprivation and having to push through and push through and push through. And, um, you know, I- yeah, for me, it was wired, but tired and
Very
sleep
intense.
onset. Not so much waking up in the middle of the night, but just being able to fall asleep. It was like I just
Absolutely.
didn't feel safe enough to fall asleep, it was just weird.
And I imagine that when you were in this cycle, then your days were very much consumed about like thinking about like what's happening and how I'm going to fix this, etc. In those periods where you went for months where you actually didn't have much trouble sleeping,
Mhm.
was it kind of completely gone, or was it kind of in the background and still having some impact on your life?
Well, like I said, every time I would get through it, I think I would get hopeful and think, okay, it's got to be done. But then I would also, for me, it was sort of living life in these extremes of being wired but tired, or all I wanted to do was sleep. It was like I couldn't sleep at all, or I would come off these stretches of insomnia, and then all I wanted to do was sleep. Like finding that happy medium, where everyone else seemed to be. I was just like so like perplexed how they were able to do that, just have that moderate ground, because it was one or the other for me. And then it seems like I would eventually get beyond that, wanting to sleep constantly and move into a little bit of normalcy. But the cycles seemed like they got closer together over time and then lasted longer when I was in them. And so that really started messing with my brain too.
Yeah, yeah. So that I mean, that obviously is so scary, right? When you have these cycles where you're doing well and they become shorter and shorter, and you project what life's going to be like in the future, etc. It must be
Yeah.
really scary.
Yeah.
And another thing I want to like just kind of ask you about was I found a little bit interesting here was that you still chose and still continue to be a flight attendant.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people would have said, "No, obviously I have insomnia. I can't do shift work. I got to do something else." But you continue doing that, which is I don't know, either you were just kind of being lazy, or you had a lot of courage, or what do you think
A
about that?
kind of a You know what? That's so interesting that you bring that up because I think part of I did a lot of other jobs in between, like as a flight attendant too, but I think part of the reason is as a flight attendant, you're able to, the more senior you get, you're able to have a lot of more control over your schedule. And so I was able to start that actually contributed to work, that being able to work my life into like protecting my sleep. You know what I mean? That whole
Exactly.
thing. So I started bidding, late departures so I could free up more of the day to sleep, things like that. So, and I never really thought of that, but that was probably some of the driver.
Now I see so clearly now. I mean, at first it was like, "Oh, she was so brave," and now it's like, actually, it was you were able to work your it was part of, like, kind of what you call it, accommodating the insomnia, more than
Exactly.
anything else, right?
Exactly. And it would have been much harder, I think, to accommodate it with a 9 to 5, and
Exactly.
I've never been a morning person. I'm still not a morning person, and I'm totally okay with that. Um, but as a flight attendant, you would have days in a row off, where I could recover, and so I was able to maneuver the sleep issue a lot better.
Exactly. Very well. I think, we have a very clear picture of, like, how intense the struggle was and how it went on for all these years, and then, by the way, you mentioned this, like, you called you kind of this family meeting, and was that sort of like a, I don't know, a very kind of intense area, or what made you think of that, or what happened after that, or did it lead to something?
Yeah, I just remember I remember what I was wearing. I remember like being just so wrung out and looking at my dad and being like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like I don't know what to do um with this problem, and just the family just being like, I remember too my mom saying, maybe we can check you into the hospital and they can knock you out, because it was like I mean, it really was. I almost hesitate to say this because I don't want to freak anyone out that's watching this because I don't have this anymore. But that's what it was getting to, and more than one doctor even wanted to put me on Xyrem, which was pretty heavy drug,
Wow.
and I
Yeah.
didn't do that, but
Yeah.
it got to that, so yeah, I don't know what came of it. I can't remember. I just remember that just kind of calling a family get together and just saying,
Yeah.
I'm at a loss here. So
Wow. Beth, there was one more thing I wanted to ask that escaped me and now came back, which was, a lot of this happened again, 20 years ago before we had, social media, Facebook and things of that nature. And, nowadays, I think, you can kind of easily find someone who's struggling with insomnia, some type of group,
yeah.
which there are some, there are obviously some issues with a lot of these groups, but still just knowing that there are other people who are suffering like that can in itself be helpful. In your, like, did you ever come across anyone who seemed to have the same issue, or was it very lonely, or what was that
Mhm.
like?
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things is the kind of loneliness around it. And this was before, I mean, I'm trying to think if I even had a cell phone back then. But it was before, Facebook, I think, or I knew about it anyway. And so I didn't come across people that had this like I did, or people would think they had it, like they'd say, the usual, have you tried the warm milk and have you tried the baths? And maybe it's like, oh, yeah, way beyond that. Um, but yeah, I would work a lot of international flights and I'd look at like a plane full of 747 people and all these people would be sitting straight up sleeping, like not even like zonked out or like just sitting with their heads straight up and just being so like perplexed, like how are they doing that, and there might be one person on the plane with their call light on, like working or doing something, and I was just like, yeah, that's my people right there, I know. But yeah, I think getting into a community where there's people that understand what you're going through, like the Slack community, and just being able to just be who you are with what you're experiencing and not feel like there's any shame around it or that you have to cover anything up, or there are other people going through this. It's just you don't hear about it so much. So I see what a benefit that is for all the students in Slack, and yeah, really,
Yes, right. And
really
yeah,
important to get that support.
100%. And yeah, I mean, you kind of confirmed what is kind of obvious, which is that back in those days, it's, I mean, it was almost impossible to connect with people, which means that, I mean, I'm sure there were tons of people who struggled. It was just that how would you find those people, and how would you know
Yeah,
that there weren't
right.
any avenues for that?
Yeah.
But okay, so now again, we have a very clear picture of what happened, and then take us through, like, when did things start to change in a, in a positive direction?
Well, so my recovery story was a little bit different. I wish I had known about this, community back then. Um, but it happened a little bit differently. I am a tapping practitioner, faster EFT practitioner, and part of my certification, there's 4 levels to that certification, and part of my certification was to do a certain amount of swaps with my fellow practitioners in whatever certification level they were in. And so I did dozens and dozens of these swaps with my
And,
friends.
sorry, Beth, but for people who don't know, a swap, is that just you
Mm,
practice on each other, something like that, or?
exactly. It's just practicing on each other, and so I had worked on sleep several times with these during these swaps, and I really didn't get anywhere. And I had been doing mind body work for a couple of years leading up to this point, and I was in a really good place with my health, and but this sleep thing really hung on for me. And so I had a swap with a friend who was also an amazing practitioner. And I showed up, and she said, what are we going to work on? And I thought, better pull the old sleep problem out. And I did. And, she's like, I started going into my sleep story, which can be a bit of a trance, and I'm going into this sleep story, and her name is Karen, and I'm really going into it, and I'm describing it, and I'm talking about the emotions around it and how I represent it inside, and I'm talking, and just like right when I was in the heat of the story, she slaps her, she claps her hands together really loud. She stands up and she starts dancing around, and she goes, "Beth, those are just a bunch of programs." And and for whatever reason, Daniel, that was just the moment that my brain recognized insomnia for what it was, and it took her like clapping really loud, dancing, like just interrupting and scratching the record of my brain like that on that story for me to consider that insomnia wasn't this evil enemy outside of myself that was out to get me. This this just had become like an entity, like this all-consuming powerful thing that I had been doing insomnia in my mind. It was like that at that moment, it collapsed. It just, that story sort of collapsed. And it was that moment that like it lost its power over me. And it's sort of like that's the moment the game of insomnia ended, the game of insomnia ended. And it was like it took me, I mean, I wish I could verbalize better what that felt like, but it was just this realization, this magical moment that you talk about a lot, but super magical. And then I did some things after that, but that was the biggest component of it. It was that realization that this wasn't this thing outside of myself. And what was I saying with that? Lost my train of thought. But anyway, yeah, I was gonna go somewhere with that, but
It'll come back.
yeah, Go ahead.
No, I think I mean I've heard you say this I think one time before, and it's it's
Yeah.
never always so powerful to hear like how I mean everything changes in one moment, which is true. Like, but still, like that, if she had done that, maybe like some other, maybe 5 years earlier or 2 years earlier, maybe it would have been totally different. I think there must have been a lot of kind of inner work you had done that led you to have that insight, or right?
You're so spot on because, and Coach Michelle brought this up, that it it was most likely a lot of the work I had done prior to that that allowed that moment to happen, and I had never really thought of it like that. And I think that's exactly right. And I also think like I've thought about why did my brain do that? Why did it need to sort of? It was almost like it needed to let go of some of these safety programs in the order it felt safe to do that. And it was almost like my nervous system was ready to let that one go. It had achieved a certain amount of safety in other ways that it was just time for that to happen. And I don't know if that's true or not. Like that's just my sense of it. But I really have not struggled with insomnia since. I've had sleepless nights. I mean, I had several of them, but they don't last, I mean, they don't go on and on. And my response is so much different now too. It doesn't concern me anymore. So yeah.
It's amazing. And now, um, I wanted to also ask you more about this kind of the realization. And you said, I sort of realized that there were just these programs that
Mhm.
kind of like my mind had created for
Yeah.
safety reasons and things like it. Can you expand on that? What did you see? What did you realize?
I think what I saw, well, of course, for me, the word program, I know what that represents because it's a big part of the teachings in uh, through my tapping certification. So we understand the unconscious and how that we do sort of develop all these programs, from a young age. And I think like that seed had been planted at a young age, and that program, I just kind of kept running that program, running it until that program got better and faster and bigger and more powerful in my mind over my life. And it was when she said that, like, those are just a bunch of programs, that it reduced it to just that. It was like, that's all it is. Like, that's it. This big giant thing, like this monster in my life was just a bunch of programs, and
That's it. I mean, talk about like, I often say like, awareness precedes change is a common expression, which I think there's much truth in it, but sometimes it's like awareness is change. There's nothing
yes,
left to do when you see things sometimes.
yes, love that.
Wow. And like, would it, just to kind of contextualize for anyone that's tuning in here, the way I hear it is something like, for example, from a very young age, the brain thought that, being awake, not sleeping is this threat, an enemy, an opponent, and it's something we have to fight and control and deal with. And that was sort of the program that over time got like reinforced, kind of grew and become stronger. And then you finally saw it's just an idea, it's just a program, it's just kind of a thought habit. Does that fit into what you call a
Yeah,
program?
no, that's beautifully said. Yeah, I mean, I see it all now. I see what my brain was doing, but at the time when I was in it, and I didn't have this education, I just didn't see it. But yeah, it's spot on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Very well. And from that moment, from the clap moment and on, uh, was it a pretty much like a balloon that just fizzles? Like there's not much more struggle from then on, or was it a little bit like a bumpy path and then there was no struggle? What happened after that?
No, it was more like it sort of dissolved it. And and then I just did like a bit of hypnosis. Like I have this favorite hypnotist. I did some recordings like that had never worked at all prior to that, that started like they worked really well. And then 3 weeks after that session with her, I had a 3-week training where I had to get up every day at 5 a.m. every day. Like I only had 2 days where I didn't have to get up at, and I did it. I did that. And I think that really helped me believe and trust that I could sleep again, really believe that. I mean, was not easy because again, I'm not a morning person. But by the end of the 3 weeks, I started being like, okay, if I had to do this, I could do it. So that really helped me too. And then from there, like I said, I will have still some things that I don't sleep well for, but everybody does. So that's totally normal. I mean, that's fine with me. It doesn't affect my health or my life or anything.
Wow. Now, just a few things I wanted to touch upon that I think could be helpful for everyone tuning in again. One is like we sort of already talked about this, but the you know you know what I want to talk about a little bit is like this flexibility. I have sometimes say like flexibility isn't always your friend, uh, and I guess and now that I'm saying this, I think we already talked about it. So I'm just going to summarize for the people out there, like, and you can comment, Beth. It's like that. We can see that when you were a flight attendant, you did this accommodation, and and please comment on this. Actually, during that stretch, you probably felt really lucky that you had a job that allowed flexibility. But in
Mhm,
retrospect, you can
mhm.
see that probably that wasn't so helpful. Does that sound true?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I knew that's what I was doing at the time because I was like, probably, like you said, like, thank goodness I have this job where I can work around this somehow. But all that did was make it stronger, It just, but I didn't know that at the time. Yeah, but I mean, I am of the belief that our sleep systems can be very resilient. You know, because I'm kind of, like my schedule now is not very regular, and it's okay. I'm fine
Yeah,
with it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. I totally agree, of course. And okay, so we talked about it. Now, the other one was just you mentioned that when you had this nice hotel room with a nice bed, you didn't sleep, but then in some random, like on the floor,
Yeah.
you slept easily. Now that you understand more, like, how would you explain that?
Well, there was less pressure. I didn't have the conditioned responses that I had to nighttime. Like when I shouldn't be sleeping is when I didn't feel pressure to sleep. I mean, it's just paradoxes. Just so many paradoxes.
Right.
But yeah, it was just like feeling no pressure to sleep is when I was able to sleep.
It's like that. I mean, it's when you're in the struggle, it seems so mysterious, right? But
Yeah.
then when you look at it from the outside, it's actually so logical in a way that when you have this, I should sleep now. This is normal to sleep now. You don't sleep when it's like now I shouldn't be able to sleep at all. Then it comes
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
Wow. And other than that, I just want to. Oh yeah, I just want to ask you, like the becoming a tapping practitioner.
Mhm.
Was that was that in any way kind of a part of like you know um, kind of learn for your own purpose of insomnia, or had nothing to do with that?
I think that was born from I did my master's in holistic health, and it was when I was in that program, I became super fascinated with neuroplasticity and the ability that we have to change our brains and self-direct those changes, and having some say in how we want our brains to operate. And that to me was just such a hopeful concept. And I did my thesis work in that, but in that project, you know, was having to understand the mind, and in understanding the mind, I became very, very fascinated with the unconscious part of the mind too, and the role that plays in our experience. And that was sort of the coaching work I was doing prior to finding you. Is strictly looking at the subconscious structure around insomnia. What's going on that's holding up this problem? Um, and that's what I was so glad to join your program, because I feel like you've really filled in the blanks for me. You know, I'm still very, very fascinated, but tapping is a part of that, a part of that passion I have for neuroplasticity and self-directing the unconscious to make, to hold the way we represent things differently. I hope that's making sense. Um, but what I've learned from you too has just helped me marry all this together, and I'm still working that out, how to marry all this together in a way that really makes sense for me. So, which I'm really enjoying.
Right? No,
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear this. I'm sure, it's going to be something that's really helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Your own take on all these teachings,
Yeah.
and and I guess my maybe my last question was it like when did you think I should become a sleep coach? That's kind of my niche. Like when did
Yeah.
that idea happen?
It was like it was a bit serendipitous as things are, and I was getting all this knowledge and with the tapping and whatnot, and I had a business group, and at the this was, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something. And she was like, well, you really have to pick a niche. You really have to figure out a certain group of people to serve and support. And I was like, well, I don't know who I'm gonna help. And um I was running into people that are having all kinds of problems with their sleep, and I thought, yeah, I had that problem too, hugely. And that's, how I made the decision to sort of niche down in that. And it was the right decision, because I have a lot of personal experience with it. And that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So glad it did. And then now, like the final question. This has become kind of my standard final question for guests is that if you could say something to yourself, I don't know, 20 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, um, I would tell myself that this isn't your forever. And I would tell her that your brain is not broken. And I would tell her that you can't lose your ability to sleep. You can't lose your ability to sleep.
So helpful. I'm sure that would have been very appreciated
Yeah.
by by Beth 20 years ago. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad. And by the way, for those of you who are still here with us, I meant to actually do this earlier, but it slipped my mind. I'm so excited that we'll quick announcement here that, and I'll do it at some other platform too. But you're joining BedTyme as for now a substitute coach. I'm super excited about that. Thanks so much, Beth.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that too, Daniel.
Can't wait. It's so happy you joined that and the sleep crystal and everything else. So, by the way, again, everyone who wants to connect with Beth, here's um, the website. And thanks for coming on. And talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay, sounds good, Daniel.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.